Hello, I'm Lydia, and you're listening to Lens from the Fens. Now that I've gone through what I do in terms of getting ready and the information I collect beforehand, I'll just go through a few tips and advice on wildlife photography based on what I've learned over the years and from other photographers that I've followed. Truth be told, I'm always learning. There's always something that I learn over time that I didn't know of before, and it either worked in my favour or not. So with any form of photography, you're always learning, you're always testing it out. You're never going to know everything straight away. It's always something that you continue to learn over time. There's a lot of factors that need to be considered as well when you're going out, things like weather, which can often change quite rapidly. There's all these different factors that go into when you're wanting to take a either wildlife picture or even a landscape picture. So yeah, just always consider that you're always learning. There's always things that you won't know of before that you then incorporate later on, whether it's your career or as a hobby. Yeah, so just keep an open mind. Don't always think, oh, I've got to learn everything there is about photography. There's no such thing, or it's very rare that a lot of people know everything to do with photography. So yeah, just always keep an open mind. Don't worry about not knowing everything all at once. When it comes to the factors incorporated when doing photography, one of the big ones, as I said, is things to do with weather. When it's a windy day, when there's lots of cloud around, obviously you're going to get changes in the amount of light coming through your lens to your camera. So having an ISO setting for cloudy weather, and then you suddenly get bright sun that will come through, your image will become very bleached out, because the settings you had for cloudy weather certainly aren't the same as when you have bright sunlight. So I often stick to ISO 400. It's good for when it's things like an overcast day, get a decent amount of light through. And then I often go to the manual or aperture setting, again depending on my surroundings. When there's a lot of background activity, so if there's a lot of foliage or something that's quite distracting in the background, then I'd use my aperture to make sure that I blur out that background or whatever's in the foreground. And then anything with a moving subject, then I'll alter to changing the shutter speed, so the camera will do everything else for me, besides obviously the settings that I've selected at the time. So I use the when I'm on automatic focus, I will use what's called an AI servo setting. So this is for focusing on moving subjects. A lot of the time when I'm photographing birds, they're obviously probably either in flight half the time, so it's hard to try and get a one-shot focus on them. So the AI servo autofocus definitely helps with that. Other settings that you'll typically find on a standard photography camera is just simple AI focus, which if the subjects do move, then it automatically switches from a one-shot focus to the servo, which is quite handy, but I often stick to just the servo, just because all my subjects are moving pretty much all the time. And then you just get the one-shot focus, so that's for focusing on still subjects, so whether that be a plant or if you're doing landscape, then it just makes sense to go to just one shot focus. When I'm staking out or I'm in a natural hide for quite some time, tripod is the best option for this. The sturdier the better. I do often use my monopod, as I said earlier, but the tripod will just allow that more stability. There's less movement because you're all set up ready for whatever's going to come into view. if it's something like let's say, for example, a branch for a kingfisher perch, then I would focus, the one shot focus on that, whatever's in the foreground, whether it be a nest or a perch, and then they'll be ready to shoot when the action does come around. So whether it is a bird or something else that comes into that area, at least you're then set up and you just simply have to hit the shutter button to get your shot, obviously without causing any noise or spooking the animal. As a lot of photographers will say, telephoto lenses are the best option for photographing wildlife. You get to choose between singling out an animal when you're zoomed in quite far, or you can include the environment fully, where you can obviously zoom out. I quite enjoy including a lot of the surroundings. It gets an idea of the environment that the animal is in, and then things where there's too much going on in the background, I'll try and zoom in as much as I can. But I quite enjoy just having the surroundings included with the animal, just to give the impression of what habitat it is often found in, and just a nice representation of what the area looks like. I consider not to use a flash gun when I'm out photographing wildlife. I prefer the natural light. That's where I would use my white balance and my light settings on my camera. So on your camera, or a typical camera, you'd have the option to have the white balance set to a certain scenario. So you can have the automatic white balance, which the camera will detect and adjust based on the lighting and the colours. Then you've got daylight, shade, cloudy, and then indoor fluorescent light and tungsten light, although I don't go for those very much. And then you can obviously custom it as well, and you can adjust the colour temperature. But always, most of the time, I go for the daylight or the cloudy settings. Of course, you can have the option to use flash if you want to obviously pick out an animal if it's in dense foliage, but again, that's just purely it's up to you. There's no right or wrong thing about it. If you want to use flash, then by all means do. If you just want to use natural light, by all means do. I think everyone over time, they get their own way of photographing. Whatever works for them may not work for everyone else, but it doesn't matter. It's your own image, it's your equipment, and just enjoy it. Enjoy doing a few experiments for things if you want to do like nighttime photography and you're wanting to get the night sky, then obviously that's another thing to go into. But just based on what I've done in the past, I would choose my timer for how long the shutter is open for, whether that runs from like just a minute or 2 minutes, just to get an idea of the night sky. But there's plenty of other landscape photographers that would know a lot more than me. So it's always best to just do a bit of research and just get the tips from the people who know it better. If you're still a bit unsure about going out with your camera first time and you're a bit overwhelmed with whatever's there, or your camera just doesn't work right for you, then the best case is to practice close to home. You can photograph your pet if you have a cat and you can get it to jump. It's quite good for getting those moving shots. You can photograph things in your garden, anything on the street if you're doing any form of landscape photography, if you have a nice wooded area, or you can look over rooftops, things like that. You can just practice that way. It's better to learn from home to begin with, purely because if you don't know what to do when you're actually in the field and you're getting an interesting subject, then the images could come out poor as a result. So just do practice. I still do that often when I'm out and about. If I'm struggling if a background is very well lit up and the foreground isn't, let's say if there's like a wood in between me and the subject in the background, then I'll often adjust my ISO settings for what's in the background rather than focusing on the light in the foreground. So yeah, again, I'm always learning as I go. So yeah, just practice when you can, and then when you do eventually go out in the field, just enjoy it. And if you manage to get the pictures that you want that are really good, then that's all you can do, and you're happy with it, then that's all you need to do. It's something people can enjoy over time, and it doesn't have to be all techie based or anything like that. If you enjoy it and you get the pictures you want, then that's fine. I often get that a lot of the time when I'm out photographing. It's for my own pleasure in a way, just enjoying going out, taking photos. It's something I've always enjoyed doing. Obviously, if I do get pictures and I want to share it, then I do. But yeah, more than often, I just enjoy going out and just having my camera and photographing whatever I see, even if it's just a record shot for a bird. At least it's a record for me that I've seen it, and then when I get good pictures coming out of that, then it's all more for the better, really. So for the last few pointers, a couple of these are a little bit more techie, for those a little bit more advanced in photography, but I will go through them anyway, just so there's a range of tips and advice that you can either take away or leave. So obviously one of the key things to take on board is to keep noise to a minimum. You want to keep a low profile, so in terms of your camera, you'd want to opt for a silent shutter. Again, it just avoids making too much noise and spooking your subject away. And it's also better for the subjects to move towards you rather than you follow them. It's just, you don't want to spook the subject too much, and if you're constantly following it, then it will eventually go away to the other side of the wood or the other side of the river. So either go for slow movements, moving a bit at a time when the subject isn't looking your way, but more often than not, you can get better pictures by allowing the animal or the bird to move closer to you, just so you're not spooking them away. It's also worth considering composition in your image. I opt for rule of thirds, where you can choose to have the grid on your screen of your camera, or use it later on to edit in Photoshop or whatever image processing system you use. I often avoid filling the screen completely because I want to have the option to crop. I have a specific crop that I go to when I edit my favourite images, so I would want to have as much space in my image as possible to allow me to do that crop. And then when you do come to edit your composition, it's worth considering the direction that the animal is looking in, if it's not towards you. So if it is facing to the right, then make sure that you have more space on the right, because then it will lead the viewer to include the background and the environment that that animal is in. And again, if the viewer, if the subject is looking left, you'd want to have more space on the left. It balances it out, but again, it's anyone's preference. If you want to fill the screen. Again, this is all based on what I've been doing for quite a few years now. So as I mentioned before, including more of the habitat, it allows the viewer to get a sense of what the environment is like, as if they're there, and they're being involved in the image as if they're there too. I do that a lot with my subjects, rather than just having or trying to get really close-up shots. Including the environment, for me, it just works. Again, it could be different for you or anyone else doing photography. And then one of the last points that I would want to make is to be patient. It's always worth paying attention to the animal's movements. If they're not looking your way straight away, like just don't make too much noise, because they probably will move off if that happens. Keep an eye on their movements, know whether they are, if they're perched on the edge of something and they're ready to fly away. If it's a bird, then just be ready for that. Wildlife is wild for a reason. Over time, if you get to study them, you'll then know what actions they'll take, and you'll be more aware of how to get the best shot from your photography. So that's pretty much it for what I have wanted to discuss in terms of advice and tips on getting ready to go out with your camera and what to do when you're out in the field. I hope that this is of some use to quite a few of you. I always like to provide a few tips here and there for people who want to get more involved in wildlife photography or even landscape photography. But yeah, it's been quite nice to sit down. I obviously still want to do more out in the field, take you guys along with me, talking about what I see when I'm out and any topics or discussions that are on my mind that I want to talk about as well. But yeah, it's been nice. Again, I've got a few more sitting at home stories in the pipeline. And if you still want to get in contact, you can. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Just search for Pinfold Photographic. You can direct message me, or my Gmail email address is lensfromthefens@gmail.com. If you have any more questions, or if you have any wildlife stories of your own that you'd like to share, then please do. I always like to hear from you, the listener. So for now, I'll say stay safe again, and I will speak to you all again very soon. Bye bye. My podcast cover shows my own image created using Canva. The theme music is provided by Purple Planet Music. Check out their royalty-free music at purple-planet.com.